Okay, well, I have 1 o'clock, so we might as well get started. Welcome everyone to the Safe Routes to School Coaching Action Network webinar. My name is Michelle Gully, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Is part of a series of webinars by America Walks and the National Safe Routes to School. This program is to educate individuals and organizations on topics that the overall success of Safe Routes to School across the United States. The National Center for Safe Routes to School have both been made possible by funding from the Federal Highway Administration. So before we get started, I do want to demonstrate a few administrative details. Please note that all of the attendee phones are muted. We have a large number of participants on these calls. Muting the phones helps to cut down confusion and cut down on background noise, make it more enjoyable for everyone. If you have a question during the webinar, please answer the question and answer box on your computer screen, and as facilitator, I'll read the questions as they come in and respond if I am able. If you cannot access the webinar program at all, but obviously can hear me, please send me an email at mgully@americawalks.org. That's mgulley@americawalks.org, and I'll do my best to walk you through getting online when the program with us. Also note that the webinar is being recorded, so if you cannot access the program at all, you will have a chance to download it at a later time from both the America Walks website and the National Center for Safe Routes to School website, and those addresses are www.americawalks.org and www.saferoutesinfo.org. Now, questions pertaining to the subject matter of the presentation may be entered at any time while the speakers are presenting, but they'll be addressed at the end. We do try to save about 10 to 15 minutes for that. We do ask that if you have questions about Safe Routes to School that don't pertain to today's topic, that you please submit those directly to the National Center for Safe Routes to School via their website. And again, their address is www.saferoutesinfo.org. Now, if you're unable to get all of that information down, I know I threw quite a few websites out at you. Don't worry, I'm going to post that all again at the very end of the webinar, and I'll also be posting all of the speakers' contact information again as well if you have trouble getting that down while the presentation is going on. So now I would like to briefly review the agenda. If you'll turn your attention to your computer screen, you should see the agenda right now. You'll see that we've already gone through the first point, which is the welcome and administrative details. And next, we're going to dive right into our feature presentation, which is Safe Routes to School in Indian Country Part 2, Success Stories and Lessons Learned. And we have our three great speakers for you again today. We have Catherine Campbell. She's an Education Program Specialist from the Bureau of Indian Education, the U.S. Department of the Interior. Kevin DeCepolo, a Youth Program Specialist from the Office of Youth Partnerships and Service from the U.S. Department of the Interior. And Misha Caspier, from the Arizona Department of Transportation, Safe Routes to School Program Senior Planner, and the president of MG Tech Writing, LLC. So with that mouthful and quite the pedigree of our wonderful speakers today, I am going to get this started and turn it over to Catherine. And I believe Kevin's screen is the one that we're going to be looking at for that. So there we go. Okay, Kevin, you should see that little box popped up on your screen now. Perfect.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Welcome to the part 2 of the series. And I'm going to review briefly, because we had covered it in our first session, information about the Bureau of Indian Education. Our Bureau has 4,200 employees, and we're tri-located in Washington, D.C., Oklahoma City, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. We oversee 183 schools that comprise of 250 tribes, and we have 22 education line offices within 23 states. And we have 3 associate deputy directors that cover 3 areas: Navajo, West, and East. We are responsible for the kindergarten through post-secondary education, and we also directly operate 2 tribal colleges, SIPI and Haskell. We are located on this map on wherever you see our dots. And so a main concentration in Arizona and South Dakota, North Dakota, New Mexico. As a part of today's information that we're going to provide, I'm going to cover the health and wellness policy that our director has signed this year, and it's going to be a requirement for all BIE-operated schools for them to assess and improve the health environment for all BIE-operated schools, and they are required to incorporate these policy standards in school year 2012 and 2013. This policy is a broad and flexible policy that will allow schools to identify their own local health priorities and implementation areas. Throughout the year, we're going to provide training that will help in the planning of this policy and implementation, and it will also provide access to resources and instruction on how to perform school health assessments and evaluation. And there are 9 sections to this policy, and they are as provided on the slide. The first being the wellness console. The BIE-operated schools would be required to develop a local level wellness console, and they may have help and support through the ADD's inline office. And the console will just be a group that meets every other month, and they develop an inventory, an action plan, and they post their local policy, and they communicate with their school and their community on how they will incorporate the health and wellness components of the policy. They will also develop partnerships and connections, and the part of the Safe Routes to Schools may be part of these partnerships. The second one is the school meals and snacks, and it's a policy that all our schools serve and meet the minimal nutritional values as defined by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they meet different guidelines for those foods that are sold or served during meal times. And they also provide standards in the storage, preparation, and serving of those foods. And they should also be seeking information from USDA about how to participate in any of the programs that are offered through the USDA. The third is the healthy, traditional, and cultural foods. Through the policy, the schools and residential facilities will incorporate healthy foods that reflect the traditions and cultures of the student body. For instance, at Flanjo Indian School up in South Dakota, they have worked with the Intertribal Buffalo Council to provide bison meat for their students, and they take part in providing those dishes to their student body. Also, another area is the gardens. One such garden is found at the Circle of Nations School, and they are providing the food for their school. The fourth policy section is competitive foods and beverages. It's basically schools should not withhold foods for punishment or as rewards, and they should be restricted to only health and nutritional messages when they're marketing. And schools should develop a local policy outlining competitive food and beverage requirements. The fifth is the health and nutrition education. That's just basically providing health education in the school on a variety of levels. And also nutrition education for students so that they may have information concerning tradition and cultures of the body, of the student body, and have different levels of communication through to parents and the cafeteria in the classroom, and just basically integrating a nutrition message to the students. The sixth section is physical activity, and one of the activities that the BIE is requiring of our BIE-operated schools is that schools make sure that they implement activity breaks, at least 20 minutes of daily recess for the elementary level, not withhold physical activity as a punishment, should make the use of the school facilities open through joint use agreements and facility use agreements. They make sure, as this pertains to the Safe Routes to School, strive to make safe and active walking and bicycle routes to school and promote these and similar alternative methods of travel to and from school, such as walking and bicycle programs. Another area that the BIE has initiated is the World Fit Cooperative Agreement. and we are going to have Olympic athletes come into our schools to promote a walking program. So that will roll out this year also. The seventh section is a school employee wellness. For basically, schools need to have a wellness coordinator to help put this policy, this health and wellness policy in place, and make sure that staff are also participating in wellness activities. And the eighth section is physical education. It's basically saying that all BIE schools have opportunity for physical activity and fitness education, that there is a curriculum in place for that, and there are appropriate classroom student-teacher ratios, and teachers that teach PE should have annual professional development on effective practices for physical education. One of the agreements we also have is a Coach Across America, and Kevin will touch a little bit on that. Finally, the before and after school programs. It is the policy, part of this policy, that before and after school programs should strive to dedicate at least 20% of their time to physical activity. And the before and after school programs offer a variety of physical activity and nutrition education opportunities. Also at the middle school and elementary school levels, a healthy snack can be offered, and that would be tied into the USDA programs that are available also. So with a variety of these sections, we can incorporate a lot of things that will promote health and wellness in our schools, and we encourage our grant and tribal schools to do so also. Kevin?
Thanks, Kat. And just to tie in how this all fits in with Let's Move in Indian Country, the BIE Health and Wellness Policy was one of our greatest accomplishments in the first year when we rolled out this new initiative. Just a little bit of a background to recap from last week as well. Let's Move in Indian Country came about from First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative, which is centered around solving the issue of childhood obesity across the country. To kick off the initiative, President Obama signed an executive order that pulled together a task force on childhood obesity that did a data dive of all federal programs, grants, and programming that's centered around healthy nutrition and physical activity. And as a result of this report to the President, it highlighted what a serious issue childhood obesity is across our country. But what was also pretty startling was the statistics that showed that childhood obesity affects American Indian and Alaska Native youth at higher rates than any other group studied. So off of these statistics and other evidence from the CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services, the First Lady decided that it made sense to do a sub-initiative focused around her national initiative of Let's Move, but concentrated on the particular issues facing Native American youth. And that's how Let's Move in Indian Country was started. We launched in May of 2011 on the Menominee Reservation, and over the past year we've had a lot of successful opportunities for events highlighting potential partnerships, and also working with our BIE schools to make sure that health and wellness is part of our students' daily lives. We have our four main pillars of making sure this is how we're going to tackle the issue of childhood obesity in Indian Country. Our first is creating a healthy start on life, where Indian Health Service is striving to certify all federally run Indian Health Service hospitals as baby-friendly and promoting breastfeeding with mothers, because statistics show that breastfeeding youth will have less likely chance of having childhood obesity later in life. Our second is really part of what BIE is looking to tackle with their health and wellness policy, but also something that we're looking to expand with the Department of Education in public schools as well. But we're looking to transform 100 learning environments. So that's either after-school programs, or it could even be a Boys and Girls Club. But we're working to to work with the Bureau of Indian Education schools to really promote health and physical activity every single day. And that was one of our big accomplishments, as I mentioned, was rolling out the policy that Kat was talking about earlier, and we're excited to implement it now for this school year. Other opportunities are building capacity through AmeriCorps and VISTA programs, which can help with school lunch programs or summer feeding programs, and also programs like Kat mentioned that we have a cooperative agreement with a program called Coach Across America, which will be providing coaches to some of our schools in this school year. We have the goal of increasing physical activity because, quite frankly, not even just for Native American communities, but across the country, adults and children aren't getting the recommended amount of physical activity at a weekly basis and a daily basis. And then also increasing access to affordable and healthy foods, because a lot of our schools are in areas that we would consider food deserts, and we're working to make sure that there's higher quality food available to them, and also focusing on traditional means of whether it's a school garden or a community garden or local food markets. So one thing that we're really excited about with this initiative is the amount of federal government support and programs that are available that we're tailoring to meet the needs of our Native American youth. As I mentioned, the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative. We also have programs like the Presidential Active Lifestyle Award, where we've run challenges of physical fitness challenges in all of our BIE schools and across Indian country to promote a daily healthy lifestyle. The Fresh Fruits and Vegetables program that USDA provides helps provide healthier food in our school day. As Kat mentioned, our MOU with World Fit will be bringing in Olympic athletes to help promote healthy lifestyles in all of our BIE schools. Coach Across America is an exciting opportunity where it's a cost-effective way of getting a certified coach into some of our schools where they can use extra support and get more training at that level to provide physical education and more physical activity opportunities for our students. And programs like Farm to School, as well as many others, are going to provide healthy nutrition opportunities for our students. So this is just a handful of programs that we're working with and looking to promote. One other pitch that I want to make here is if you go to our website, which is letsmove.gov/Indian Country. Here you'll find a lot of the resources that we have available. We have advertisements that are free to download to help promote Let's Move in Indian Country in your schools, messages from First Lady Michelle Obama, St. Louis Rams quarterback Sam Bradford, but also pertaining to our schools and for your communities. Throughout the course of this year, as we're implementing this health and wellness policy, we'll be doing additional webinar training similar to the one that we're doing today with Safe Routes to Schools. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you on our listserv to make sure that you're getting emails of when these will be taking place. So if you just go to Tools and Resources under Webinar Training, you can register here and we'll make sure that you're notified when we'll have additional webinar trainings. And it's also a great spot to see success stories and also to let us know things that are working in your community so we can highlight and hopefully replicate for other communities to do the same thing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Misha to talk about Safe Routes to Schools, and we'll take any questions at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin and Kat, for those excellent presentations. My name is Misha Catespear, and I'm speaking to you today from Cottonwood, Arizona. I'm president, as Michelle mentioned, of MG Tech Writing LLC, which is a grant and technical writing firm in Cottonwood, about an hour and a half north of Phoenix. I learned to write grants as an education specialist and teacher for the Bureau of Indian Education, which back at that time was known as the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Indian Education Programs, and we were challenged to get that much information on our business cards. But I learned to write grants and developed a real passion for trying to come up with program designs that worked effectively for our BIE schools and could benefit our children. So a little background on Safe Routes to School. The program was designed by Congress to address the issues Kevin mentioned earlier of diabetes and obesity. And so it has three primary goals. The first being to enable and encourage children, including those with disabilities, to walk and bike to school. The second, to make bicycling and walking to school a safer and more appealing transportation alternative, and thereby we can encourage a healthy and active lifestyle from a young age with kids. And then finally, to facilitate project planning, development, and implementation that improves the safety in our school zones while also reducing traffic, fuel consumption, and air pollution in those school areas. In order to be eligible for these grants, two main criteria exist. The first is that you need to be a kindergarten through 8th grade facility, and the second is that the programs and projects need to be conducted within a 2-mile radius of the school. So here we have an aerial map of Whipple Ranch Elementary School in northeastern Arizona, and you'll see that that's actually a 1/4-mile radius being shown there. But if you take a look at that and think what 2 miles would look like, if we zoomed out that far, you wouldn't be able to see much on this map at all. So it's quite a distance that you can cover with 2 miles for these grant projects. And so I just wanted to indicate here that the epicenter of your project does not have to be the school like you see it drawn here. You can move that circle of services in different locations. And so you see here where by moving that circle, we were able to cover the neighborhood that is there featured to the southwest of that school and really develop a project that serves an area that has more need. I like this quote from Black Elk when we're talking about Safe Routes to School program design and development. You've noticed that everything an Indian does is in a circle, and that is because the power of the world always works in circles, and everything tries to be round. And so when we talk about the Safe Routes to School program, we have to go back to our thinking that the truth is we want our children to be healthy, happy, safe, and wise. And the Medicine Wheel helps us identify the kinds of partnership agencies with which we can surround our children and with which we can collaborate to develop effective Safe Routes to School programs. And the Medicine Wheel concepts tie neatly in with the 5 E's of successful Safe Routes to School programs: education, enforcement, encouragement, engineering, and evaluation all provide means of addressing some of our tribal and rural community health challenges. So when we're talking bicycle and pedestrian safety and health and wellness, we can provide education classes that also discuss alcohol use, obesity, and diabetes. Enforcement can deal with the speeders in our community, but not just in our school zones, across those tribal communities where we live, and especially along the state routes that tend to bifurcate our tribal communities. And then we can also use encouragement events to give our tribal children opportunities to practice safe walking and biking with chaperones in safer areas. Engineering can help us stripe the turn lanes and install the missing sidewalks, bike lanes, and shared use paths that we need that will help make things safer. And then if we do neighborhood assessments, we can provide the evaluation that we need to determine the specific types of program development that's most going to benefit our home communities. And together, these 5 E's can help us reduce the traffic flow in our school zones and have positive impacts for our natural environment while increasing the safety for our tribal and rural children. We speak about 2 different kinds of grants primarily being offered under Safe Routes to School: infrastructure and non-infrastructure. And so here's a picture from the Tohono O'odham Nation in Sells, Arizona. This is about an hour west of the Tucson area. And what this is a collaboration going on between the Gila River Indian community and the Tohono O'odham Nation to improve the school zone right in front of Indian Oasis Elementary School. And these two tribes came together initially as part of a national course training workshop, and were so excited about the opportunity of working together that they were able to do what we often recommend is a great starting place for infrastructure projects. The cheapest thing you can do is road paint and signage, and you can get a lot of mileage out of those elements as far as infrastructure goes, and show community members a real good development towards improving the safety for the children walking and biking. So some other kinds of infrastructure might be sidewalk installation, speed reduction kinds of installations, pedestrian and bicycle crossing improvements, on and off street bike facilities, shared use paths, and what we've seen, and you'll see more of in this presentation, are the formalizing of desire lines that we have that tend to get cut by students and adults walking through our tribal communities. Changing those into multi-use or shared use paths is a neat way to use Safe Routes to School infrastructure dollars. And I want to feature something that's quite unique that is effective as an installation in a lot of tribal communities. When we talk about these high-speed state routes that bifurcate our communities, the installation of a pedestrian refuge island can be a good way to install a crossing to a school along a busy state route, and then we can change that crossing for the kids, making it safer because they only have to tackle crossing one lane of traffic at a time. So this has been used in some tribal communities, and it's a quite effective tool. When we speak of non-infrastructure projects, we go back to what Kevin had mentioned a couple weeks ago about 60 minutes a day of physical activity being recommended for our kids, and studies have shown that this is the kind of exercise or the amount of exercise that can most benefit our children. And so we know that non-infrastructure programs tend to include education, encouragement, and enforcement types of projects, and can include things like you see here in this slide, public awareness campaigns, traffic education and enforcement efforts, student sessions on pedestrian and bicycle safety or health in the environment. And then additionally, you can use the dollars to provide funding to train volunteers and managers of your Safe Routes to School program. One of the lessons that we've learned that's been a harder lesson and is something we're still trying to come up with strategies to circumvent is the fact that these programs take bodies to sustain. And we've seen across the state of Arizona, not just in our tribal communities, but metropolitan communities as well, where Safe Routes to School programs have gotten a great start and then have died out because the champion who was leading it left, took another job, may have moved away. Here you see featured from our Planning Assistance Program site visit, this is again the Tohono O'odham Nation, and the young man heading towards the camera is Antonio Benavides. He was the champion for the Tohono O'odham Nation Safe Routes to School program, and bless his heart, he's gone off to Harvard now, and he's studying for the next couple of years economics and statistics, so he can come back and be of even more benefit to his tribe. But when he left, that program now has been challenged to continue and to find another leader. So our recommendation is to work with the leader, the champion that you have, but back them up with some kind of an alternate and treat them well. Don't work them so much that they get burned out and don't want to continue championing the program. And so you can use non-infrastructure dollars to pay them some kind of a stipend if it's a conflict of interest with their existing salary, and then also reward some of your volunteers with small stipends to keep them interested in the program and give them something back for the time they donate. We talked a little bit about encouragement activities as being part of non-infrastructure projects, and so here you see featured some neat photographs. In the top left is pictured International Walk to School Day in 2008 on the Yavapai Apache Nation, which is central Arizona, about an hour and a half from Phoenix. And there in the top right is what we call a bike train. And you can do this, although it's pictured here in a metropolitan area, you can certainly do this in rural and tribal communities. You get a skilled bicyclist to work with the children, teach them about how to do safe bicycling, how to outfit themselves with their helmets and bright clothing. And it's a great way to get children excited about bicycling while teaching them as they ride how to be safe. And then one of the things that we've seen in Safe Routes to School programs across this country is that, the truth is, as adults, we model behavior to our children. And so if we can have bike-to-work days that the adults participate in tribal communities, then we can get the children to see that even as adults, we do bicycle as well, and as well do walking to work days. And then the kids see that that's something that everyone can participate in. And so these are just some simple examples. Walking school buses are another example. And, of course, International Walk to School Day will be coming up in a little over a month on the first Wednesday of October this year. So we're seeing more federally recognized tribes developing successful Safe Routes to School programs. Definitely here in the western part of the United States, we've seen the predominance of these programs. And if you're interested, you can go to saferoutesinfo.org, which is the National Center for Safe Routes to Schools website. And this handout that's featured here that has so much information, it's probably hard to read on the slide. The handout's called Overview of Safe Routes to School in Tribal Communities. And there under Marketing and Promotions, you can download this and see more about what some of these programs are up to around the country. So I'm going to feature some of the programs that have been real successful in our tribal communities around the country and some of the things that we've learned. Ronan, Montana, on the Flathead Reservation, those schools tend to serve a large population of Native students, and they've done a real neat collaborative effort there where the City of Ronan's Parks and Recreation Director, Jennifer Rolfness, has been working with Taylor Lonsdale, the Montana Safe Routes to School Program Coordinator, and with the Flathead Reservation to come up with neat Safe Routes to School program designs. And so some of their outcomes and activities include developing a really focused community-wide approach to safe routes, partnering with a Highway 93 project to work on some infrastructure development, and then having a Walk to School Day, but also a Celebrate Paths Earth Day. And they've done an education program for the students. In the state of Washington, Tulalip Elementary was blessed with this neat healing pathway overpass. And so in addition to the infrastructure development of this pathway over a very busy highway to the school, they've also done a pedestrian and bicycle safety fair, and they've been able to use infrastructure dollars in a little more unusual way to illuminate the paths because we know in winter months and in the early spring we get quite a bit of darkness in our northern states. And so if we're going to encourage children to walk and bike to school and they're coming in the early morning or they're leaving games late at night or different events at the school that take place in the evening, team practices and things, even illuminating a pathway can be a way to encourage them to walk or bike to school. And as Kevin mentioned during his presentation, Let's Move in Indian Country held a real neat event in May of 2011 to kick off the program with the Menominee Nation. And so in the Keshena, Wisconsin area where Menominee is located, this event was able to then segue very neatly into last October, them conducting their first International Walk to School Day event. And so we see that the collaboration of Let's Move in Indian Country with Safe Routes to School can be a neat way to kick off a new Safe Routes to School program and inspire a full-fledged program, or even just to implement portions of the Safe Routes to School program as you're trying to develop into a larger program. And so you see a lot of community members came out for this event, and they got great support, and of course the children were very active at that time. So we know from studies that when we add sidewalks, we can really reduce the risk of pedestrians being struck by cars. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier that we're seeing that's having great success in our tribal communities is going out and identifying existing desire lines, or what we sometimes call goat trails, where the kids or community members have kind of beaten the path to the school or to the local pool or to tribal administrative buildings. And if we go back and formalize that with asphalt or gravel and make it into a formal shared use path, then we've accomplished a couple of things. We've created a safe routes for the kids to walk and bike, and we've removed them from the roadway areas where they can be anywhere close to the cars. And so we can identify these trails and, using Safe Routes dollars, improve those trails and find ways to connect our communities and make things even safer for them. And so this is Wisconsin's Blackcourt Ojai tribe, and they started with a school route travel plan, and then this path ended up being about 2 miles long. And during the time that they were developing this path, before it was ready, they would do a park and walk kind of opportunity where they would have the buses drop the kids off at the powwow grounds, and then those kids would walk with parents and chaperones to the Head Start building and then off to school from there. Some of the other neat things they did was they used their non-infrastructures dollars to develop signage and maps of their tribal trail system. And then they also used AmeriCorps volunteers. And so, as Kevin mentioned, both the AmeriCorps program and VISTA programs can provide the kinds of volunteers that may become champions for our programs or support people for the programs that we're trying to operate. Because to operate an event like you see pictured here takes several adults. It should not be on the shoulders of one individual. So I wanted to call your attention to the fact that this is the second photo we've seen of a mascot, and that these mascots, or things like the World Fit program with Olympic champions, can really speak to the children. Sometimes they hear messages from a fuzzy stuffed animal better than they hear from other adults. So here's a continuation of that same pathway we just saw with the infrastructure dollars that they were using in the area of Wisconsin. In Arizona, we've developed two really unique programs here. So in addition to our infrastructure and non-infrastructure grants, we also offer what we call Planning Assistance Program grants. And so limited resource communities can apply for these grants, and rather than getting funding to develop Safe Routes to School programs, they get technical assistance in the form of 2-day site visits, and then we spend a good portion of the year helping them to develop and design their Safe Routes to School program, and we help them write their next grants for either non-infrastructure or infrastructure dollars. So this is a partial list of some of the 26 communities we've served, but since this program started in 2007, we've now been able to serve 5 different tribes and are working with the Wallapai this year. And here in Arizona, we have 28% of Arizona's land base belongs to federally recognized Indian tribes. We have here in Arizona 22 tribes, and so even though we don't have as many tribes maybe as Alaska or California, as Kat mentioned earlier, we do have a predominance of BIE schools in our state here. The other couple of things that our Arizona Department of Transportation Safe Routes program has done successfully is this last spring we had our tribal Safe Routes to School workshop series. And so this is the first time in the country that there was an all-tribal workshop series. And so we did a national course training, and we did an active school neighborhood checklist training, and we did the walking school bus workshop, and had the participation of 7 different tribes, one of them being the Boss Fork Band of Chippewa from Minnesota came all the way out to join us for our training. And so trainings can be a neat opportunity to do tribal outreach and get the message out about Safe Routes to School. We try to every year do some Safe Routes to School workshops in tribal communities. And then we keep trying to grow our tribal database. So we have tribal contacts to reach out when we're going to do new events. And then when we have the opportunity to go speak to things like the Arizona Tribal Transportation Partnership, we have a Tribal Transportation Strategic Partnership here. We've been to talk to them, and we have the Intertribal Council of Arizona. Those provide neat opportunities to take the Safe Routes message out specific to tribal leaders in the transportation sector. These photos are from Alaska, and so the top couple of photos are the community of Chivak, Alaska, and these are Yupik children. And the challenge, of course, in Alaska with the long periods of darkness that they have is to try to be seen. And so they've done a neat reflectorization program where their goal is to get these reflectors into the hands of children across Alaska to help them be safer walking and biking to school. And so they used this reflectorized dinosaur as part of taking out the message. And so there in the bottom photos, you see kids from Kaufman Cove and Claywalk with the dinosaur learning just different ways to be seen and be safe. But one of the things that's very challenging in Alaska, of course, is the use of these four-wheelers. And in this community of Chivac, there's actually only 4 vehicles in the community other than these four-wheelers. And those community vehicles are owned by the school and the airport and a couple of the tribal departments, because the only road there they have is to the airport. And so what you'll see across Alaska is that people either walk, they have a four-wheeler, or they get by on snow machines or dog sleds. And yet the leading cause of death and serious injury for kids in Alaska are these four-wheelers or other off-highway vehicles, with motor vehicles being the second leading cause. These pictures also are Alaska's Safe Routes to School program in the community of Chivac. And I just like this quote by Lone Man. I've seen that in any great undertaking, it is not enough for a man to depend simply upon himself. And so again, this goes back to the idea of developing an effective Safe Routes to School team and the idea of partnering with other departments beyond Safe Routes to School, beyond your schools, to try to develop comprehensive programs. And so these photographs feature a number of things. There in Chivac, of course, like much of Alaska, because so much of the ground is frozen most of the year, these boardwalks take the place of roads in Alaska. And so 82% of Alaskan communities have transportation facilities that don't meet the Federal Highway Administration's definition of what a road should be. The top right photo shows another challenge, which is that because, again, the ground is frozen, the infrastructure for sewage and groundwater tends to be above ground. And so then that provides a challenge of trying to get across that infrastructure when you're walking or biking to school. And so they've come up with neat strategies of expanding the boardwalks into these types of bridges. And so in communities that have unique issues like this, you can still use Safe Routes to Schools dollars to improve those walkways to school. The bottom left is a real neat project that took place at the Naknek reservation area. And so that's a planning session between the Bureau of Land Management and the community. And so they started with 40 people in their planning, and by the time they were done, they got to the walk audit stage, they had 60 people involved. And this program was designed by a 9-year-old girl. It was her project idea because she saw so many of her friends getting harassed by people on their four-wheelers as they were trying to walk to school, and she thought there should be some kind of a change. And so this whole project took off with her being at the fore of it. And one of the things that they did was they used these Bureau of Land Management maps, and they had community members with tracing paper indicate where the desire lines and the trails were within the community. And then they knew where they wanted to try to do what is the new fitness loop. And so they were able to connect some of these trails, and now they have this fitness loop that connects the clinic, the school, the senior center, a pool. It goes by 2 very scenic lakes. It has a couple of rest areas with picnic tables. And again, this whole concept coming out of the mind of a 9-year-old. But it brought together several different organizations. The National Park Service worked with the schools and the communities to help develop this fitness loop. And so here's another neat example of partnership. This was actually some dollars from what has been known as the Indian Reservation Roads Program that will become known as the Tribal Transportation Program under our new MAP 21 legislation on October 1st. But this photo depicts a geogrid black road, and so a really neat design to protect the tundra from the damage that was happening from these four-wheelers. and a neat way to connect schools and communities together. And so this was a partnership with the National Park Service again and the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program, and then collaborating with Bureau of Land Management and the BIA using the IRR funding. They were able to plan this, design it, construct it, and then community members are using their own resources to maintain these black roads. And what's neat about the Indian Reservation Roads dollars is that they can often provide upfront money that's needed for Safe Routes to Schools infrastructure programs. And so if you're interested in reading more about this particular GeoGrid Black Road, this is the Hooper Bay area of Alaska, and I can send you the link to this article. So when we talk about evaluation, this is a neat shot of some team members that did a walk audit in Dillingham, Alaska. And, of course, there you see in the background a hotel that's owned by Sarah Palin's parents in Dillingham. And you can just see that the low light conditions make it challenging to see people, thus the reflectorization program they developed, and that the roadways are narrow, and combined with the darkness, that can be a real interesting challenge to some of our tribes, not just in Alaska, but in our northernmost states. So when it's too far or it's unsafe, what do we try to do? We've got reservation communities like we saw last year in Kayenta, Arizona, where children are on the bus an hour into school and an hour back from school. And so we try in those conditions to develop some kind of an on-campus option for the kids to walk or bike. So we can use the track like you see pictured here. We can use a gymnasium. Kids can walk or do laps. Even wheelchair-bound children could use a track like this or use a gymnasium area. We can use ball fields for the kids to get some laps in. And we can do park and walk kinds of events like what I talked about there earlier in Ronan, Montana, where the school bus drops the children off at a location like a mall parking lot or a church parking lot, and then the kids walk a half mile to school with the chaperones. We can also develop safe routes to bus stops. So from our neighborhoods themselves out to where the school bus stops, we can do improvements or do walking and biking kinds of safety events to make that part of the route safer, even though the kids may not walk all the way into school. And then if we develop safest routes to school maps for those kids that live close enough to the school to walk or bike, we can show parents and the students the safest ways they can get to school where the roadways have slower traffic, better signage, better road paint, wider shoulders, and that kind of thing. And what's neat is this new MAP 21 legislation will have a provision for safe routes for non-drivers. So many of the strategies we've begun under Safe Routes to School will be able to continue under the new legislation. This photograph is from the Hualapai tribe. This spring we went up to Peach Springs, which is just on the southern edge of the Grand Canyon. Very beautiful community, but I just want to call your attention to the joy on these children's faces as they're running down the road. Now, of course, we want to use education strategies to teach them to do their running more close to the road edge, but you can also see in this shot that there are a number of children walking along the road edges, some correctly, some on the wrong side of the road, and that with education we can make it safer for our children because even though we're lacking sidewalk, and this photo is typical of what we see in our reservation communities all over the country with the lack of sidewalk, we can still teach our children how to manage those roadways safely. And the truth is our children are out walking and biking these road edges anyway. We just want to teach them how to do so and be safe. So a couple strategies for evaluation. If you Google either walkability or bikeability checklist or look on the National Center for Safe Routes to Schools website, you can download these walkability and bikeability checklists. If you go to ActiveSchoolChecklist.com, you can work on the Active School Neighborhood Checklist, both downloading it and then uploading your data that you gather when you get your Safe Routes to School team walking the neighborhood and the school zone. And then you get an idea of the kinds of programs that you need to develop, whether it's more of an education type of thing, whether it's more enforcement, infrastructure development, or that kind of thing. And so there you see the same roadway we just saw in the last shot with two of our team members evaluating the neighborhood in the school zone in Hualapai area. So we talk about how can we sustain our Safe Routes to School programs. We get them going, we're having good success, and we want to keep them going. And so we can look around and see where are there other tribal Safe Routes to School, or where are there other tribal grants that could support Safe Routes to Schools programs and help augment the dollars we get from those Safe Routes grants, but also achieve some of the objectives the other programs might have. Obviously, diabetes prevention, injury prevention have similar goals to the Safe Routes to School program, and those grants may already exist and be looking for a mechanism by which to get more community members active. And so Safe Routes to School provides a neat way to get more people active, even adults, even the elderly. And so these are just not a very comprehensive list, but some of the kinds of grants that you might look around and we commonly see in tribal communities that may be supportive of either infrastructure kinds of projects or non-infrastructure projects that you might be trying to do with Safe Routes to School. And then people from these programs at your tribe might also become very ideal people for your Health and Wellness Council under the BIE's Health and Wellness Policy, or they can also be members of your Safe Routes to School team. Or why have two different teams? You could have your Safe Routes to School team also be your Health and Wellness Council. Some of the other things we've learned about writing competitive tribal grants is that we may be having people in Washington, D.C. review grants from Alaska, and they may never have been and may never get to Alaska. And so our challenge is to provide a strong visual picture for them in downtown D.C. of what it looks like on our reservations. And, of course, we can provide photos and we can provide aerial maps, but we can also describe in our text some of the challenges like we see featured in these photos. So this was John F. Kennedy Day School on the White Mountain Apache Reservation in Cedar Creek, and you can see coming into the school zone, it's very poorly signed. There's no crosswalk marked for the children. We do have lane markings, but the truth about this roadway is that people are coming along this state route at 55 miles an hour before they get to this school, and the school, as you can see, is around the blind curve. So we can paint these visual pictures in our text, and that will show the need we have for these dollars. Some other things are that, we may not have our GIS software, and we may not have very nice, tight crash reports from our police departments. Often getting data from our tribal departments can be challenging. That data may not agree with the data that's coming from our IHS clinics. And so we can rely on other sources of data. We can plot crash sites for our site safety crash histories on maps. We can use stories from the newspaper. We can even get letters from our police chiefs that talk about the site safety and crash history in the school zones. And don't be afraid to cite some of the very interesting and somewhat scary data that may be going on your reservation. When I was working with the Tohono O'odham Nation under our Tribal Planning Assistance Program, I was extremely startled to learn that they actually have the highest diabetes rate in the world, which was very surprising for a community. Yes, they have 12 different sections of that tribe across the southern part of our state, but their population is not so great that you would think they would have the highest diabetes rate in the world. But indeed, over 50% of their adults have adult-onset diabetes. And then Indian Health Service clinic there at Cells reports that 76% of their students in the middle school are overweight or obese. And so when we start talking about these kinds of statistics in our communities, these can tell a very strong story of the need that we have for Safe Routes to School dollars to get our kids moving and to build the infrastructure that's lacking. I love this photo of Albert Einstein. And when he was asked about the development of his theory of relativity, he said he thought of it while riding his bike. And, we know from studies that have been conducted over the last couple of years, but a real powerful study that came out in January this year from the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine, they found a strong evidence of significant positive relationship between physical activity and academic performance. And so their findings suggest that if we can get these kids to be more physically active, it's positively related to how they perform in school. And the article went on to talk about that the fact that exercise can assist cognition because it increases oxygen and blood flow to the brain. And the other neat aspect of this is that with that increased oxygen and blood flow, we have increased levels of norepinephrine and endorphins. And so we decrease the stress level our children have and improve their mood as they're coming to school. And with the challenges that our rural and tribal communities face, we want our children to be as upbeat as we can, having them come to school. So if you're interested in finding out more information about what's going on with tribes in your state, you can log on to saferouteinfo.org, and at the top of their webpage, you'll see Find State Contacts, and when you click there, it will bring up this interactive map of the United States, and so you click on your state, and it will provide you the contact information for your state Safe Routes to School program coordinator. And so we'd be happy to take any questions at this time. I think we have about 5 or 7 minutes left, and just want to thank everybody for joining us here today. And thank you for your interest in the Safe Routes to School program.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Misha, and thank you to Catherine and Kevin as well. It's a wonderful presentation. We do have just a few questions, so we'll dive right in. And again, I'll throw them out to the speaker who I think they're best suited for, but obviously, everyone feel free to jump in if you have anything to add. So this one actually came in while you were speaking, Misha, and I think you talked about it just a little bit, but the person was wondering how much evidence, or if there's any evidence of a sustained shift in behavior or a shift in mode share as a result of the great efforts. For example, a measurable increase in walking or biking on these reservations beyond the specific event days that you showed.
We are seeing more interest. So, for example, with the Yavapai Apache Nation, after they did International Walk to School Day, they started to see more participation in the kinds of events that the diabetes program had been trying to run for years. The diabetes program at Yavapai Apache had been running at least a biannual walk event where they usually just got seniors coming out, and after we did International Walk to School Day, we started to see more parents and kids start to take an interest in walking, having done International Walk to School Day there. In the Clarkdale area, where we have some of these photos, which is another parcel of the Yavapai Apache Nation that's not part of their administrative parcel, same kind of thing happened. They did International Walk to School Day, and the community then has really embraced much more of the walking and biking type of events for the community and for the school since. I can't speak to what's gone on in other states after they've conducted these kinds of things. My understanding is after these trails have been formalized, many more people are getting out and using the trails.
Great. Okay. So this question, I think, Kevin, might be best suited for you being part of the Let's Move program. The question was, what is the optimal breakdown of the 60 minutes of physical activity that's recommended every day to achieve the results such as obesity reduction? And what activities have the best outcomes? And how is success being measured? So that's a mouthful for you.
Sure. For the 60 minutes, especially when we do our palette challenge, there's not necessarily one ideal best kind of physical activity that you can do, and it's also that 60 minutes doesn't have to be all consecutive. So where Safe Routes to Schools would play a role is if a student is walking 15 minutes to get to school, 15 minutes to get home from school, and then they have recess during the day for 30 minutes, they're getting their 60 minutes right there. Things that we've found has sometimes been if there's a challenge or some kind of competition involved, you get higher participation. But the main thing that we're trying to focus on is just making physical activity part of our everyday conversation, whether it's suggesting that students take the stairs in school more often, or even employees for that matter. I try and stay away from the elevator as much as possible here, or suggesting to parents, when you're driving to the store, park in the back of the parking lot. That way you at least have to walk all the way to the front. And those are just little helpful tips. But as far as the best physical activity, we don't have one set curriculum or anything for that matter. Things that get the full body moving. Also trying to promote physical activity throughout the entire day. So encouraging our teachers to give quick physical activity breaks where students are able to get up out of their chair, stand up, stretch a little bit. Studies have shown that this actually helps, with brain function and
Great.
learning ability. So
great suggestion. And Misha and Kat, would you like to add anything?
I just would like to say that there are some couple of curricula that are out there that have been built that may give people some ideas so they don't have to try to recreate the wheel as far as coming up with program designs. And so, again, if you go to saferoutsinfo.org and just put in the search bar curriculum or curricula, there are several different types that have been developed for kindergarten through 8th grade. And so the lesson plans are already there with the materials, with the time it takes to do the lessons. And so you can look and see lessons that are very specific to pedestrians, to bicycling, and get some really neat ideas of the kinds of things that might work best at your school.
Great. That's a great suggestion. Okay, and we're coming up to 2 o'clock, so I'll just throw one more question out there, and this one actually is a popular question. And it is, has or will there be any research conducted on the impact of physical activity on students' achievements in closing the education gap? Do any of you in the programs that you're working on know of any research that's either going on or has been completed?
There's been a number of studies, and again, you could look on the National Center for Safe Routes to School and maybe in the search bar put academic achievement. And so there's several different studies that have gone on, not all of them being done by the same organizations, but there's some real neat data that's being acquired and has been acquired both since the advent of Safe Routes to School and prior to its development as a formal program.
Okay, great. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, just to build off of that, there's been a ton of research, still ongoing, but some has been published as well, just showing the connection to physical activity and increased test results, and even outdoor education. I was just at a conference last week where they were highlighting the statistics of these studies showing that outdoor recreation helps increase brain function and learning capabilities. So the research is out there.
Great. Okay, well, we are up to a little after 2. Sorry for keeping people a little long, but there were some great questions, and we have great speakers, so I want to take advantage of it for everybody. I do want to, again, thank our 3 speakers, Misha, Kevin, and Catherine. So thank you again for a wonderful presentation. And I'd want to remind everybody before you go today that our next webinar is going to be on September 25th, and it is the Community Connection, School Travel Plans and Building Community Support. So you can register for that either on the America Walks website or the National Center for Safe Routes to School website, and both of those addresses are up on your screen right now. And with that, I guess I'll just say good afternoon to everybody, and we hope to have you on with us again in a couple weeks. So thanks again, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.